This morning I made this commitment to you. I said I would challenge you as leaders. Personally, I would make you think about leadership a bit differently, and I would inspire you. So hopefully with Adaba Walla, I got you to think about leadership and how businesses work a little differently. Joshua Bell was about what are the perceptual lenses your people and customers have around you. I can think of a few better examples today of real human leaders than Howard Schultz in Starbucks and how he helped turn that company around. And I thought I'd close with a story that's very inspiring to me, and it shows you the power of what human beings can do once again when they really set their minds to it. The butterfly effect in chaos theory, if you know it, is a very powerful theory. The butterfly effect tells us that everything in the world is interconnected. So because of that, when a butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world, the impact is felt everywhere. Perhaps some form of the butterfly effect was at work when in 1998, Craig Kielburger, a 12-year-old kid from Toronto, was reading the newspaper one day and stumbled across a story about a boy on the other side of the world who was also 12 in Pakistan. His name was Iqbal Masih. Iqbal had lived a very different life from Craig. He had been sold into slavery by his parents at age 4 and forced to work in a rug factory 100 hours a week. He escaped after 6 years of that and started speaking out against child labor practices and was killed as a result. What caused a 12-year-old middle-class kid in Canada, Craig Kielburger, to completely change his life because of a story? Only the butterflies know. But that's what he did. Craig discovered that there were millions of other children around the world just like Iqbal, who had been kidnapped or sold into slavery very young, who were living desperate lives with no idea of the world outside their slavery and no hope for the future. So at age 12, with a 25-year-old family friend as chaperone, he went to Asia.
The only time I was actually nervous on my trip was that 1 second when I said, oh God, what am I doing here? I'm 12 years old and I've never taken the subway by myself.
What he found there shocked him. Kids half his age living in the streets, doing anything they could to try and get a little money to survive. Absolutely inhuman living conditions.
Going to the garbage dump, what we saw, there were children who were spending their entire life rummaging through literally mountains of trash and searching through the scrap metal and the garbage and the medical waste and the food, and they're searching, for their livelihood.
And no hope for the future.
Were the children who I think moved me the most. These children knew. The children as young as 5, 6, and 7 years old knew that for the rest of their lives they'd be working here in the brick kiln. But they knew that generation to generation this debt would be carried. And even the day which they died, they would live and they would work on this brick kiln.
How many hours does you work a day?
12 hours a day.
12 hours.
I couldn't promise him that I would put him in my suitcase and take him back to Canada. I couldn't promise him a better life. But the one thing that I can promise the children who I meet with is that I will take their stories and I will tell them to anyone who's willing to listen.
Craig kept that promise. He returned home and began telling the stories he had seen to anyone he could find. He started an organization called Free the Children, dedicating to eradicating child slavery and labor around the world. It started out very simply in his parents' house with help from his older brother Mark and with a bit of help from a few classmates. But the more he traveled, the more he spoke, the more it grew.
It is a youth group dedicated to the elimination of child labor and the exploitation of children. You may be thinking, well, you're only 12 years old. This is a big problem. What can you do to help? First, I would like to say, being 12 years old is no excuse. No one has a good enough excuse for ignoring these child workers' problems. We also have a fundraising campaign in which we are trying to raise $10,000 for these children. Who will help the children if we don't? Thank you very much.
The board has just voted and will donate $5,000 to your cause right off the top. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Our union will match the $5,000 that the Fed has put in.
Craig started traveling to the countries where the exploitation was worse, and he teamed up with adult organizations. They staged raids to get kids out of slavery and return them home to their parents and get them rehabilitated. Because Free the Children was made up entirely of kids, it got a lot of press attention, which it used to its advantage.
The youth group Free the Children says the Canadian government is undecided about whether to endorse the rug mark label, which ensures through factory inspections that child labor is not used in imported carpets. So today they held a press conference to introduce the label to Canada themselves.
He even took his message to the highest corridors of U.S. power.
These are the corridors of U.S. power.
You have the power in your words, in your actions, and in your policy making.
There was never a single point where it dawned on me. The press was an important tool. I think it was something that we began to realize as Free the Children evolved from simply being a ragtag group in Toronto to a group of young people around the world.
He's been essential. I mean, there have been a lot of adults who are also well-informed and who've gone and seen things firsthand or whatever, and they have not been able to draw the attention and appeal that he has.
Now, Kielburger is helping set up American chapters of his organization, working to establish labels for products not made by child labor.
It's a very, very powerful vehicle that you're creating here. If in fact you can move children in this direction to take action.
Over the next few years, Craig traveled the world, amassing a small army of young people to help him in his cause and some pretty influential adults along the way. Wherever he went, he spoke.
This law was passed in Canada and 11 other countries. But here in Italy, this law does not exist. And when
in Italy, he took on the sex tourism laws and their exploitation of children. In Brazil, it was street kids.
So that the children in turn can go to school.
In Colombia, it was labor in the sugarcane fields.
Child labor and child abuse cannot be tolerated. If it's crossed that line, if it's become exploitation and if it's become abuse, it must be stopped.
And on it went. Millions of miles, thousands of press conferences, slowly gaining critical mass. Today, Free the Children is a global organization operating in over 45 countries, harnessing the power of over 2 million young people to not only fight poverty, but to fight the cycles which cause that poverty to exist. To date, they've managed to get hundreds of thousands of kids off the streets and out of slavery. They have built 650 schools and classrooms around the world, and they provide clean drinking water and essential services to millions more people. But perhaps the greatest mark that Craig Kielburger will make in the future is an organization called Me to We that he's created, designed to get kids in privileged countries to think about others less fortunate and to act to help them. We to Me is out to change the way an entire generation thinks and lives, getting young people to think about not being the leaders of tomorrow, but being the leaders today. Craig has lost none of the youthful idealism that he had when he was 12. Today he's almost 30 years old and is one of the most respected social activists in the world.
I still believe the most powerful force for social change in the world is young people. When they come together, when they work together, they're quite literally unstoppable. And when Iqbal Masih, who still inspires the work that we do every day in Free the Children, when he was carried through the streets of Pakistan and a young girl who was a freed child slave, freed because of his work, stood over his grave, she said words that were deeply prophetic, and she never, I think, could have even imagined how true they'd read. She said, the day that Iqbal died, 1,000 new Iqbals were born. And Free the Children, that number has been more like 1 million. In fact, now millions. Across North America, Europe, Japan, around the world, young people who have carried on his struggle, working on behalf of children's rights, fighting against child labor, human trafficking, slavery, raising their voice through youth and action groups in their schools, doing campaigns, fundraisers, adopting villages around the world, going on volunteer trips. We want to challenge you to continue Iqbal's dream, to continue this movement for freedom. We want to challenge you to join the movement.
No one has ever tried to harness the power of young people to change the world on a scale like this before. But then maybe only a 12-year-old would have the courage to try in the first place. The child has become the teacher. And perhaps that's the message for all of us adults, that ultimately we can do anything we want to do if we set up our minds to do it. And my message is this: if a 12-year-old kid can amass an army of 2 million young people to help change the world, what could possibly be standing in any of your way? Thank you all for coming this year. I hope so far it's been a great experience for all of you. Thanks a lot. And good luck with your businesses this year.
Jump on the spaceship.